Jesus plus nothing. 100% natural. No additives. Andrew Farley celebrating your freedom in Christ. Call in and ask your questions at 877-655-6755. That's toll free at 877-655-6755. Via satellite from Texas, it's Andrew Farley Live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Andrew Farley Live. This is Andrew. We are live for the next half hour, taking your calls across the United States and Canada. That number, 877-655-6755. We've got open lines right now, and that means plenty of room for you to get in with your question tonight. If you've got a question about a scripture passage, maybe there's something you heard in church this past weekend and you're still scratching your head going, what is that all about? Well, let's make it a conversation together. Right now, 877-655-6755. And if you're a first-time caller tonight, you got to know we love to hear from our first-time callers. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're a veteran listener, maybe you've called in the past, but tonight you've got something new on your mind, by all means, join us as well. Again, 877-655-6755. Let's start out tonight in Spokane, Washington, and we'll talk with Jason. Hey, Jason, what do you got for us?
Hey, how you doing, sir? Thank you for taking my call.
Yes.
So I've been brought up in church, and I understand the importance of communion, okay?
Yeah.
And I get that. And I belong to a church where they offer communion every time we meet, every Sunday.
Yeah.
I just started thinking in my mind, though, and I'm having an issue with it because I don't know if I'm supposed to partake every time it's offered. It feels to me, because I know you're not supposed to do things out of ritual, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's sometimes that it's being, I don't know, processed as a ritual, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around, why do we do this? And are you supposed to just come to a certain point of, a spiritual point where it is needed? Because I get that it's needed, right, at some points, but
okay.
Every Sunday, though, is that necessary?
Yeah.
Every Sunday? Is it a ritual? Where in the Bible does it talk about, if it's offered, you should every time, and this is why you should,
Right, I gotcha. Well, yeah, the question is something new happening? Because if something new is happening at the Lord's Supper, we'd better do it, every week, every day, every hour. If you're getting more forgiveness, we better do it very often. If you're getting more cleansing, we better make sure to do it, every 20 minutes, every 20 hours. If something new is happening to you at the Lord's Supper, well, then that would change everything. And the short answer to that question is no, nothing new is happening to you at the Lord's Supper. How can we say that? Well, Jesus said it. He said, do this in remembrance of me. This is about remembrance. So you can have a birthday party, you can have an anniversary celebration, and you can also celebrate the body and blood of Christ by having the Lord's Supper. Those are celebrations in remembrance of something that already took place. So I think the confusion comes in when some people either say or teach or insinuate that something new is happening to you at the Lord's Supper. And in fact, we perpetuate that fallacy when we dim the lights and make it into a confession ritual and then act as if we're getting cleansed right before the cup comes down our row, right before the bread hits us. We grab that morsel of bread, we grab that little thimble-sized cup of Welch's grape juice, and we hold it up, and right before we take it, we imagine that something new is happening. We are getting purified. We are getting cleansed. But do you know that that's not the truth about the Lord's Supper? The truth is, in the Lord's Supper, we are celebrating the fact that we've already been cleansed, that we've already been purified, that we've already been forgiven. We're doing this in remembrance of him, not trying to cause something new. So where did this idea come from, this idea of you and I waiting for that cup, waiting for that piece of bread, as if this ritual is going to be a purification? Well, there is a single verse in the book of 1 Corinthians that says, "Let a man examine himself." And it's in the context of celebrating the Lord's Supper, let a man examine himself. And if you were to take that verse and just isolate it all by itself, put it on a pedestal and try to create a doctrine out of it, then of course you would have people all over the world, millions of people on a Sunday morning, examining themselves to see if they qualify before the cup comes down their row. And so they're examining their recent track record, their week of sins, their month of sins, their year of sins, however many sins they've committed since the last time they ate and drank the Lord's Supper. They examine and examine and examine, analyze and overanalyze, and then here comes the cup and the bread, and hopefully they're pure and qualified and ready. Well, did you know that's not actually the context of let a man examine himself? In fact, the Apostle Paul tells us in this very same chapter what was going on. He says there's this issue at the Lord's Supper. They're not celebrating it appropriately. One of you, when you eat, each one takes his own supper first. Somebody goes hungry. Another gets drunk. He's like, "What, do you not have houses in which to eat and drink? Should I praise you in this?" I'm not going to praise you. All right, so let's picture it. There we are in Corinth. We're trying to participate in the Lord's Supper. Somebody shows up early, eats up all the bread, drinks up all the wine. Look at Aegeus over there. He's drunk as a skunk, passed out in a lazy boy chair. Look at Apollos over there. He's eaten up all the bread. What a glutton. He has not considered the poorest of us in our group who came here to get the best meal that they'd get all week. And look at Apollos over there. He's already eaten it all up. Aegeus, he's already drank it all up. What's left? Nothing. Can Paul praise them in this? No way. He can't praise them. And he finishes out this chapter saying, "So then, when you come together, wait for one another. If anyone is hungry, have him eat at home," so that you don't come together for this divisions and factions and judgment. So, do you see that they were bickering? They were judging each other. There were factions. There were divisions among them because some of them were acting like drunkards. Others were acting like gluttons. And Paul is saying, please, people, would you examine what you're doing? You are abusing the practice of the Lord's Supper. You need to examine yourself and make sure that you are eating and drinking in a worthy manner. That's what Paul was talking about. My goodness, is that not clear? And then 2,000 years later, here we are taking that verse, examine yourself, out of context, dimming the lights, playing sad music, telling people they better introspect about their last week or month of sins and try to get pure in the next 20 seconds before the cup and the bread come down their row. That is not the context of what the Apostle Paul was saying. That was not what he was teaching. Those Corinthians, those Greeks were absolutely abusing the practice of the Lord's Supper with their drunkenness and their gluttony, and that's what Paul wanted them to examine. What should we be doing? We don't need sad music. We don't need the lights dimmed. We don't need to be weeping and crying and having horrible investigations into our past. What we need to be doing is doing it in remembrance of Jesus. It's a celebration of the finished work of Christ, that he gave his body for us on that cross. His blood was shed, and he has qualified us. So look at the irony of it. Is it not sad? It's almost despicable that here we are celebrating, or supposed to be celebrating, that Jesus has qualified us, and we're trying to get qualified at a supper that's celebrating that we're qualified. Let me say that again. We're trying to get cleansed for a supper that's celebrating that we're cleansed. We're trying to get forgiven for a supper that's designed to celebrate that we're forgiven. It makes no sense. We're supposed to be giving thanks in our hearts to God, perhaps even lifting those glasses toward heaven, toasting the finished work of Christ, saying, "Thank you, Lord Jesus, that I am a totally forgiven person, that you qualified me now and forevermore," and then drinking confidently, celebrating all that Jesus has accomplished. That's the true meaning of the Lord's Supper. And when you realize that, then Jason, your question becomes quite simple, doesn't it? Do we have to celebrate once a week? Do we have to celebrate every 3 weeks? Do we have to celebrate every month? No, it's not a have to. It's a celebration. We get to do it as often as we do it. That's what Jesus said. As often as you do it in remembrance of Him. There is no rule. There is no required frequency. It's not a purification ritual. It doesn't make you more right with God. It is simply a celebration in memory of the cross and resurrection, and Jesus has qualified you forever. So, with that said, Jason, I want to put you back on. Does that make sense, my friend? Does that help?
Yes, no, that helps a lot, and that's a huge burden lifted off.
Amen. Well, it's supposed to be lifted off. I mean, you know what? This is the new normal under the new covenant. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. You will find rest. My commands are not burdensome. That's what Jesus tells us. What if that's real? And what if it's real in every aspect of the gospel? Baptism, a celebration. The Lord's Supper, a celebration. Every time we gather, it's not out of a have to or a must. It's a celebration of Jesus, and there's no prescribed frequency. We get to live from the heart and give from the heart, and man, the whole thing is lived from that new heart that God gave us. Speaking of that new heart, have you heard? We've got a new book coming out. It's about 10 days away. It's called The Perfect You. You can get your copy pre-ordered on Amazon.com. We're getting down to brass tacks here. We're about, just a little bit more than a week away, and it's pretty exciting. After 2 years of preparation, this book, The Perfect You, is coming out. It's all about living from the heart. You can get your copy on Amazon.com. Again, the title, The Perfect You, God's Invitation to Live from the Heart. Thanks, Jason. Call us back. Great question. We'd love to hear from you again. Let's go to Plano, Texas. We'll talk with Michael. Hey, Michael.
Hi, Andrew. How are you doing?
Hey, good. What do you got for us, Michael?
Yes, I wanted to know, in terms of a mixed gospel, I have a friend of mine, and in the beginning, he was all about, the grace of God, but now it seems like he heard some teaching about the law and how you have to obey completely. And one time he called me about when the lights went off because of the snowstorm, I feel led to pray, and I think you should pray too. And I don't want to turn it because, it's like a real good brother of mine, but I just wonder, how do I encourage him and tell him that, hey, we're set free from all of that? I don't know what you heard, but Christ is not about what you can and what you cannot do. I just think he starts to strike up the base, and it seems like he just got misled. So I'm just wondering, how do you go about that?
Yeah, well, he's right about having to obey the whole law, but that's only if you're under the law. I mean, James says this. It says if you keep the whole law and stumble in just one point, you're guilty of all of it. So the law is an all or nothing proposition. Galatians says that if you're under the law, well, cursed is everyone who's under the law, because you've got to obey everything written in the book of the law. Now, I've heard all of the intellectual arguments. People will say, no, we're not under the ceremonial law. We're just under part of the law. We're just under the moral law. Then you say, oh, you mean the 10? And they say, yeah. And then you say, oh, you mean the Sabbath? And they say, no. And then you say, I thought you said the 10. And they said, I did. But then you're not including the Sabbath. No, I'm not. Well, why not? Because that was fulfilled. So you mean the 9. You mean the 9 commandments? Is that what you mean? And back and forth this thing goes, and then you pop over to 2 Corinthians 3, and it says the 10 commandments are a ministry of condemnation and death. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, beginning in verse 6, there's a ministry etched on stone, and it's a ministry of condemnation and death, and it had a certain glory, but that glory was fading as Moses even brought it down from the mountain, tablets in hand. That glory was fading, and today there's something with a greater glory, something even more glorious. It's the new covenant. Drum roll, please. Jesus brought us something better than Moses ever brought down that mountain. And so this idea that we're under some of the law today, that Jesus freed us from a part of the law, but we're still under the rest of the law, is absolute nonsense. I don't care what people call it or label it or how they throw stones at it. It is just plain nonsense. 2 Corinthians 3 says, the Ten Commandments is a ministry of condemnation and death. Romans 7 says that if you are under that coveting law, that you are going to experience coveting of every kind. And then it says, apart from the law, sin is dead. Don't you want that in your life? Apart from the law, sin is dead. Man, that sounds good to me. But Paul, what part of the law are you talking about in Romans 7? Maybe you're just talking about wardrobe restrictions. Maybe you're just talking about ceremonial laws like washings and sacrifices. Isn't that what you mean, Paul? Well, Paul would say to us in Romans 7, excuse me, I gave you an example of exactly what I meant. I meant laws like thou shalt not covet, which is one of the 10. And I'm telling you that apart from the law, sin is dead. Namely, apart from the covet law, coveting is dead in your life. So why are you trusting Moses instead of trusting Jesus? Why are you trusting the 10 instead of trusting the 1? Why are you trusting in tablets of stone instead of this new heart on which God etched his very desires? So we've got a lot of rethinking to do. There are some very smart folks out there, some intellectual folks who are pushing still the idea that Jesus freed us from some of the law, but we still need the rest of it to keep our behavior in check. Are you telling me that Jesus freed us from the sacrificial system, so you'll take him for his blood, but not for his life-changing spirit? You're telling me that when it comes to lying and cheating and stealing, you'll take Moses, but when it comes to forgiveness, you'll take Jesus? Are you telling me that you will take Jesus for his blood sacrifice on Calvary, but not for his resurrection life in you? Well, here's a major piece of news. God has freed us 100% so that we are not under the law. We are under God's grace, and his grace is sufficient for us. In any situation, got a coveting problem? Trust Jesus, not Moses. Got a lying problem? Trust Jesus, not Moses. Got a stealing problem? Maybe you ought to trust Jesus, not Moses. So there's a lot there, my friend. I hope your friend will engage with you. It's a trust issue ultimately. Jesus Christ gave his life to us so that we could trust his life in us, so that every day we would look to him, not to Moses. Flirting with Moses is cheating on Jesus. We see this in 2 Corinthians 3, as that ministry on stone is called a ministry of death. And as Romans 7 so insightfully says, apart from the 10 Commandments, apart from that covet law, sin is dead in your life. Have you been trying to fight sin with a bunch of rules and laws? How about fighting sin with the Spirit of God and trusting him in you? Thanks for your call tonight, my friend. Call us back anytime, Michael. Great to hear from you. All right, let's go now to Iowa, and we'll talk with Justin. Hey, Justin.
Hi, Pastor Farley.
Hey, what do you got for us?
Well, I have a relationship question for you tonight. I've been in an on-again, off-again relationship with a wonderful, believing woman for about 8 years. And we've had a failed engagement. And our last breakup happened about a year ago, but over the course of the past year, we've kind of worked on ourselves independently. And I have a Christian counselor, and she's working with a mentor, and we seem to be growing in a good place, and yet she's still unwilling to commit, and I really want to commit, and I still have hopes for a marriage and reconciliation. And I guess I feel like I'm in a difficult place because I want it so bad, and she's still hesitant. And I guess I'm kind of always feeling this conflict between turning the other cheek and, I think you know what I'm saying. I'm losing my train of thought.
Well, Justin, let me ask you this. I mean, what's her hesitancy? If you could summarize, what are her concerns? What's her hesitancy?
We've had a roller coaster of a relationship, and I would say that her hesitancy is based in fear.
Okay. Fear about?
Fear about the relationship not going through again, or
okay. Did you break up with her multiple times?
Yes.
Okay, and why did you break up with her?
There was never infidelity, but there was lying. It was basically always based around lying.
Okay, so she was lying.
Yes.
Okay, and how does she feel about all that now? Does she still lie to you? Is she regretful? What's the current status?
No, she's remorseful, and I haven't seen that sort of behavior in 9 months.
Okay. All right, Justin. Well, this is a tough one because there's two people involved and only one of them is on the phone. And so I can give you my 2 cents in a few minutes here. I think you can't drag somebody to the altar. But if you love her and you want to marry her, then it doesn't sound like you've waited that long. I mean, you've had this on-again, off-again relationship, and it's only been on again during this past year. So if you're talking about a lifetime partner, a wife, and that's your hope and that's your heart, I would encourage you to be more patient with the situation. She has some natural fears. You broke up with her once. You broke up with her twice. She probably, she did some things on her end apparently, but she felt like maybe those breakups were undeserved. She's afraid of being rejected, which sounds like she's human. So I think you're going to have to trust the Lord to give you patience in this and maybe be in a holding pattern a while longer. You have to ask yourself the tough questions like, is she worth it? Is she worth it to me? Is it worth waiting? And, in your own mind, you might be able to set a certain amount of time that you're willing to wait and to work on this relationship. And you're essentially building trust. Regardless of her offenses, you guys broke up over and over. She's looking, as a woman, as a human, she's looking for stability. She wants love and affection and stability and hope. And given your history, she's just not sure yet. So I don't think the answer is to run away. That's sort of implying the opposite, that you're giving up on her again. So maybe if she's into this, if she's willing, you should give it more time and look to the Lord for patience there. That's my 2 cents, my friend. Haven't talked to both of you, but I hope that's an encouragement for you to stick in it longer. Ask God for wisdom. Look, you're free. You're free to make any decision you want. But I believe that asking God for wisdom and patience and moving slowly with discernment, that's the way forward. And just see where it lands. In 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, you might find yourself in a whole different situation. Thanks for trusting us with your question tonight. Call us back anytime. We'd love to hear from you, Justin. Well, if you enjoyed tonight's broadcast and you want to sink your teeth into God's grace even more, get the new book. It's on pre-order right now. It's called The Perfect You, God's Invitation to Live from the Heart. Did you know you can really live from the heart? You don't need to test your heart. You can trust your heart. God gave it to you.
For more information on Andrew's books, please visit andrewfarley.org. That's andrewfarley.org. Join us every week at this time as we invite you to celebrate the freedom of God's grace. Goodbye, everybody.